This episode of Manage Smarter is presented by Sales Fuel Coach, our adaptive sales coaching featuring 5-minute quick coaching personalized to each sales rep. Learn more about Sales Fuel Coach at salesfuel.com. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
We're in difficult times, not only for the way that we're all living, the state of place, many of us around the world, Lee, but also from a business and financial perspective. So we have an expert today. We are so lucky to have him, Jonathan Slane, expert on recessions.
It's interesting too, because recessions really expose your managers as to who's a really great manager and who's not. It exposes salespeople as to who's a really good salesperson, who's someone who's just fulfilling orders. Same thing goes with customer service or anything like that. It allows the really great people in your organization to shine, and it also exposes the not so great people in your organization.
That's right. So welcome to Manage Smarter, everyone. We are so glad to have Jonathan Slane here. I'm Audrey Strong. I'm actually the Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
And I'm C. Lee Smith. I'm actually the President and CEO of Sales Fuel.
That's right. Jonathan Slane, our guest today. So lucky to have him. Recession.com is the website. His book, Rock the Recession, How Successful Leaders Prepare for, Thrive During, and Create Wealth After Downturns, came out last year, #1 Amazon bestseller, and more timely now than ever. Jonathan is also a coach of high-growth leadership teams across the U.S., implementing an entrepreneurial operating system he calls Traction. That sounds pretty good. And focuses on working with entrepreneurial niche, specialty firms, and large corporations. About a third of the year working with teams just like yours. I do like this. We were saying, Jonathan, in your bio, valedictorian of his graduating class. Highest GPA ever in the history of Shaker Heights, Ohio High School, where he was voted the next Bill Gates, and least likely to lose his virginity. I don't know what to make of that, but welcome, Jonathan.
Well, the good news is that Bill Gates was eventually able to lose his virginity. So
the real good news is that we're here to rock today, and I've got two daughters, 7 and 9 years old.
Aww.
And so you know that I've proven them wrong, at least on one front.
Hopefully not the Bill Gates front.
Before we get started, just a note for our audience. So we have recorded in Zoom for 3 years doing this show, and there are so many people on it now. We've noticed a lot more sort of audio pixelation and dropouts. It's in the show notes, but it's kind of become more of a problem as more people are on these platforms. So expect that will happen during our discussion. We are aware of it, but don't be shocked if it happens. So anyway, Jonathan, where do you want to start?
I want to start with, we have to just jump in, because usually when I was starting the book tour, it was how do we prepare for a recession, thrive during, and then build. Yep, too late. So, the coronavirus, which we're right in the heart of it right now while we're recording this, has really put us into what we're calling an L-shaped recession. We have dropped right into it. We haven't eased into it. It's been a really steep drop off.
So what is the number one thing you should be doing first out of the gate?
Yeah, so the first thing is to assess where you're at. I mean, this is the thing, as we were doing the research for the book, all the great leaders that really rocked the Great Recession back in 2008, 9, and 10, what they did first was to benchmark their recession readiness. And so what we mean by that is that Paul, my co-author, and I, we have a tool on recession.com. It's free. It's 20 questions. You can take it there, and you'll get a score from 0, meaning you're not at all ready for a recession, and all the way up to 100, meaning that you're looking forward to the next recession because of all the opportunities that you'll be able to take advantage of. But for the audience listening, that's where I would start, is benchmark where you're at so you can know versus all the other leaders, business owners, managers out there, how ready are you compared to where they are?
I know, similar to a lot of things, it's not generally a straight shot down and a linear progress back up to good times. It's fits and starts, right? Is that what we should be expecting from a business standpoint? How do these things go?
Audrey, I love that question. I think you might hear on the news, they're throwing around some terms like a U-shaped recession, a V-shaped recession, an L-shaped recession. And simply they're trying to draw a picture of what the decline into the recession looks like and then the recovery. So in the Great Recession, we saw more of a U-shaped curve. It took us some time to ease down into the bottom, and then it took a good bit of time to ease back up to the top with the recovery. This recession is different in that we dropped off immediately. It was like literally the world hit pause and we dropped down into the recession. Part of the reason I don't think we're just going to bounce back from this one is that a lot of the things that we've paused are just lost. So, for example, all the airline flights that we're not taking right now, it's not like people are going to have pent-up demand and then take 20 flights right away as soon as they can fly again. Haircuts. You're going to get one when we can all go get haircuts again, but you're not going to get 5 to make up for the ones that you missed. And the same thing with many services, restaurants, same thing. You're not going to eat out a bunch of times to make up. So all of those things mean that we have this huge void in the economy that won't be made up for with pent-up demand later on. Some things, like people may be delaying going out and buying a new washer dryer right now because they're scared, they're not sure if they can spend, they're not sure how much savings they'll need to get through this. And then when the crisis is over, they may feel more confident making one of those purchases. But a lot of our economy is service-based. A lot of us are knowledge workers, and so that's where I don't think it's going to be a quick recovery.
So the L-shaped recession doesn't really account for what the recovery will look like. So since you believe this is an L-shaped, then what do you think the recovery looks like when it happens, and when do you think it'll happen?
Yeah, so I think we drop down into it quickly, and then slowly over time we're going to eke our way back to a new normal. I think a lot of what's going to happen, though, Lee, is that this is going to change a lot of how people work. Y'all were mentioning at the top of the show, like now that everybody in the world is on Zoom, the fidelity of Zoom has taken a hit. I think people, though, are going to get better and better at Zoom. Internet will catch back up. But I think a lot of work will start to move virtually, and that's going to change massively how the economy reacts and what it looks like. But I think we're looking at a long, hard slog to get back to even. So I think we're talking 6 months to a year before we're getting to that new normal. So I know that some people listening, again, may be rolling their eyes. They may disagree with me about the depth of this. I'm just looking at the numbers for the virus, how many we're going to have, and then also looking at unemployment skyrocketing right now, as well as the fact that we won't officially even be in a recession until after June, when our government releases the numbers for how we've done over the second quarter. So it's going to take a while for it to even sink in for most people, I'm guessing, to see it on CNN, to see it on Fox News or wherever you get your news, that we're in the recession. After you do the benchmark, though, the thing I wanted to talk about is that the next step would be developing an emergency brake. And that emergency brake is really for you in your business, with your team, or even personally. Like, what are the tiers of your plan depending on what you see happen to your income personally, or your revenue if you're in a business, or the revenue of your division? In other words, if you're used to, at your business, it's $1 million business, and all of a sudden you see that business decline to 900,000, what would be the expenses you would cut? What would be the people that you would look to lay off if need be, in order to make sure that you can keep breaking even? And that applies for an entire company or just a division, if you're a leader of a division. It also applies to your personal life. So for me, my wife and I, we have a life plan. We know that if we saw our income drop to 90%, this is what we would cut and in what order. 80%, 70%, if we draw our income drop to 50%. We've talked through all that in the cool, rational light of day right now, instead of when things get emotional and we have to actually enact those cuts, because we know that then we'll be making emotional decisions that will not be as good as what we've got now.
That's great advice. I should come live with you guys. Look, we made a plan, my husband and I, but it wasn't in reverse order cutting. It was looking forward to the future, but it's great that you have that in place.
We have both sides of it, Audrey. So I love that thought. It's just, the tough part, I think, for all of us is, if you have to make cuts, you want to be able to execute. You don't want to have to go through the emotion of thinking about it and then executing immediately. So I think that's where just having that written plan that you can pivot to would be so powerful.
What's your advice as far as making selections or making cuts?
Well, so I would do a 4-tiered plan, Lee, where you've got 4 different levels, and then you take a look at your income statement. If you're a business, then you're going to just look at each line item. So you've got a line item for the costs for cleaning in the business. You've got a line item for what we paid to our consultants, our professionals. You've got a line item for vehicle expense, uniforms. So, you have to figure out, does this thing get cut in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4? Am I going to reduce it a certain amount, a certain percentage, or cut it completely? Maybe at tier 1, you cut it 10%, at tier 2, 25%, and at tier 3, it goes away completely. I think every leader needs to make those decisions. At tier 3, that's where I would recommend you get into layoffs. And I know already, since all I've been doing is I've been on the phone with companies all over the world since this all went down. But the thoughts are that at tier 3, which many companies have already jumped to, this is where we're going to be laying people off. And really the thought there, what we've seen from the research from the Great Recession, is to cut once and cut deep, if at all possible, as opposed to every Friday letting go of 2 more people. Very quickly, the culture erodes. And then it's like just every Friday, everybody's hiding under their desks or hiding, I guess, now behind their microphone at home, hoping that they're not the next ones to get cut. So if possible, cut once, cut deep. And then at tier 4, the remaining people in the business are going to be the ones that are taking pay cuts. And what I'm recommending is 100% for the owners of the business, 25 to 50% for senior management, and 10 to 25% for everybody else in the company. And again, those are just a starting point. I think every company has to make a decision what's right for them. But I do think that we need to figure out a way to protect the golden goose to keep the company marginally profitable, and then we can move forward.
How do you define the tiers? Is it by 10%? So the tier 3 would be down to 80% of revenue, prior revenue, or how are the tiers divided? Like, how do I know I'm at tier 3?
Yep. So what I would say is that I was using revenue as a convenient example because it transcends all businesses. But it's for each leader to think through, what is that number in your gut that gets you to change your behavior? And so it might be revenue, it might be profit, it might be margin. It might be the number of leads that you see come through on your website, right? So if you're a business and you're like, look, I know in my business, if I get 12 leads a week, I'm doing pretty good. If I only saw 10 leads come through, that would make me nervous. If I saw 6 leads in a week, then I'm doing something. I'm starting to dig into it to see what's going on. So I don't want everybody to think it has to be revenue driven. It's whatever metric in your mind changes your behavior. And so I was talking to a plumbing company, and they go by the number of plumbers. They've got 80 union plumbers that they keep busy right now. They said if we ever saw our need drop to 70, then that's our first tier. At 60, that's another tier. At 40, that's another tier. And if we're ever below 40, then that's a real issue for us given the volume of work that we expect to be doing. So for each business owner or leader, you need to figure out which key performance indicator, which metric drives your behavior, and that's what I would use to set your tiers.
How do you know, what's a good signal then that it's time for you to enact your recovery plan?
Yeah, so I think if we're pivoting to recovery, which is really when the economy starts to strengthen and we're recovering, now it's time to take advantage of some opportunity. So and that's why we wrote the book and we called it Rock the Recession, is that we're more excited about the opportunities that come in a recession than we are about regurgitating kind of the conventional wisdom about cutting employees and cutting expenses. So Lee, what I mean by that is really recessions are a great time to think about what skills can you learn such that you'll be able to rock the recovery. So maybe it's that, you wanted to go virtual because you could reach a larger audience. Now would be a great time to become an expert in how to use Zoom. If it's that, if you knew Spanish, you could unlock a huge portion of the market because there's a lot of potential Spanish-speaking clientele that you haven't been able to tap into. And now is a great time to download Duolingo and start to practice your Spanish. So new skills is one idea. the other thought to rock the recovery is, what assets do you want to buy? So what are the assets, say you're in a business that requires machinery. You've always wanted to start a distillery. The equipment, the tanks are expensive, but there are going to be plenty of distilleries that go out of business during this recession. You need to have conversations with your banker, letting them know that you would love to buy that kind of equipment from them if they did have that kind of equipment become available. So if the bank does repossess tanks and you want to start your distillery, that could be great for you and your opportunity as an entrepreneur, because you can get all of that equipment for really cheap, as opposed to having to buy it brand new when the economy is booming. And so, but right now, before we're in the recession, is the time to start having those conversations, to put your banker on notice so that you can have those opportunities.
That's interesting. We got a few minutes left, Jonathan. One
Okay.
question I have, I'm the news junkie for our company, and I monitor all day just to keep an eye on things. And I've seen that what's your opinion on furloughing versus layoff? Because I know that the stimulus allegedly has some incentives to furlough and not lay off, so that you can recover more quickly and be more viable more quickly when we come out the other side.
Yeah, so I have a hard time believing that the final CARES Act will completely penalize business owners that maybe laid people off already, or that laid people off instead of furlough. So I do think in the end, it may be that you get a percentage of however many people were working for you. So if you want to be conservative and furlough people instead of laying them off, I think that's perfectly fine. At the same time, though, I'm one to conserve capital. Right now, if you're listening to us, and it's about hoarding cash. And I don't ever trust the government to be able to save or rescue me or my business or the company. I think that we all need to assume that it's going to take a long time for all of these loans to get approved. There will be a crush of applications. Everybody is going to want to apply for, and they should, the SBA programs, the relief. And at the same time, I don't think we should keep people on the payroll just because we're hopeful that in the future we'll be able to participate in the bailout. So I guess that for me is, I would err on the side of not paying the payroll if possible. If you want to call it a furlough instead of a layoff, I'm fine with that.
There's a point where unemployment becomes a more compassionate play for your employees than keeping them on the payroll under conditions such as that, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's where if you have employees that make 30,000, 40,000 a year, you can't go to them and say, hey, we're enacting an across-the-board pay cut of 50%, and we expect you to participate. For those, it's a better play to go do unemployment or to do something else. So I do think as leaders, too, we have to be compassionate about there's what's best for the business, there's what's best for the employees. And I think for all of us, it's having honest conversations. I think that's what people really crave in these uncertain times, is that we don't leave a void. We don't have a vacuum of communication. If you're not sure, just tell your people that. It's okay to communicate with them every day and let them know that you're not sure. What you don't want to do, I don't think, is let it go 3 or 4 days without saying something, even if it's to tell them, hey, I know I don't have a better answer for you today than I did yesterday, but just want you to know that still here, still trying to figure it out. Hope that you'll show us some grace given the craziness of the situation.
Fantastic information.
Yeah, Audrey mentioned traction at the beginning of the show, and that doesn't sound like a lot of fun either, because that's something my dad went through when he had a bad back. But I'm sure you're probably talking about the kind of traction, though, that helps you get unstuck out of the mud, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. The idea there is that I work with companies that want to grow, that want to take it to the next level. And I meet with them once a quarter to provide traction to make sure that we hold them accountable for accomplishing the goals that they agree to. And then the benefit is, since I work with so many different companies, I can bring perspective. Dave Rendell said once, it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. And so I think for me, it's just being able to help provide that outside perspective and sometimes that kick in the butt to get people out from being stuck in the mud, like you said.
Well, we'll see how this all unfolds. Recession.com is Jonathan's website, and on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, Rock the Recession. Great information, Jonathan. We're so privileged to have you on the show to help everybody out. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Audrey. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.